Let's warmly welcome our speaker from German, Valeriy Burmistrov, who will introduce leadership skills a must-have for every test engineering. He is working as Director in Quality Assurance in TeamViewer, located in Germany and also in Armenia, Yerevan. He has more than 50 years in engineering. Now let's warmly welcome him and listen his presentation attentively.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you for choosing my talk. I will try to not disappoint you. One disclaimer. So sometimes I might be able to speak too fast, which might become a problem. So if that happens, please raise your hand and say, okay, you are too fast, and then I will slow down a little bit. Or I can also do it in Russian, but I got it better in English. So as said, I'm from TeamViewer. So a good thing about TeamViewer is basically it's a German company, but also in Armenia. Who knows what TeamViewer does? Okay, for almost everybody. It's good. Actually, the interesting thing to tell about TeamViewer, it's not only that TeamViewer is our traditional software, still very successful. We are growing in number of sales, but it's our cash cow, and we are actively diversifying. We are trying to develop something new. And a couple of products to mention would be the IoT, so Internet of Things, which is actually mostly developed in Armenia right now. And second would be augmented reality, so to bring up the case of the computer-to-computer help to the field technicians. And so that's about TeamViewer. A cool thing about TeamViewer is because it's Armenia, I can speak 3 languages each day. So with Germans, I speak German. With Armenians, I speak Russian, not that much Armenian, and our official language is English. So it's all actually on my backlog to maybe develop the Armenian language skills. Right now, I can say Barry Lewis. I can say something like Shat Hacheli Ekerkin Linel Yerevanom. But that would be it. Okay, and I will not be able to write it. But it's actually, I'm happy to be in Yerevan, really. I'm here every several months, so love the city, love the people. It's the only problem with Yerevan is that after your hospitality, I need to always lose the weight. So that's the bad part. Okay, I'm originally from Russia, and then the last 4 years I'm living and working in Germany. So the topic of my talk is about leadership. I would like to know a little bit more with whom I am speaking. So especially who of you are engineers, who of you are managers, and who of you are new in profession. Please raise your hand if you are an engineer, so not a manager. Okay, thank you. And please raise your hand if you are a manager or director or something. Okay, less. Excellent. So that's the right audience for me, because my talk is actually for engineers, not for managers. And there is a reason for this, exactly because traditionally the topic of leadership is for managers. So I have special people for this. And my punchline and my key idea, which I will be dancing around, is that it used to be like this, that the leadership is for managers. And right now it's pretty much open for everybody, or even expected from everybody a little bit. So I will try to explain what I mean by that. Let me start by basically trying to differentiate or define what leadership is. So I usually try to define the topic leadership to contrast management and leadership. So if we're looking about what management is and what the leader and what leadership is, so mostly if we're looking on the left-hand side, it's about authority, and the right-hand side is about influence. And if we're talking about then manager, does the command and control. And if you're a leader, you need to inspire and to support. And as the result of which, also then people then have to follow, have to do what then manager tells them. And leaders then you kind of need to convince somebody to do something. So from this perspective, then if I'm a manager, I will tell you something and you will do it because you need to do this. If I'm a leader, then you would be, I will try to convince you, inspire you what to do. Which has then the implications that if you have the authority Actually, if you are a good manager, you should not use that authority too much. You still need to basically convince people to do stuff. But also, if somebody is lead, you don't need to have this authority. And I will try to promote the idea, and especially in QA, this is relevant. This is actually needed to be a leader, to influence people, to convince about something, to initiate things. Now, does everybody know who Simon Sinek is? These videos? Not everybody. I will actually then suggest that you watch videos of Simon Sinek. So I recommend you actually two things. The purpose of my talk is to actually stimulate your thinking on one hand, and then give you something that you may then do homework and learn. So one thing, if you are interested about this topic, I really recommend that you watch the videos. It's the famous TED Talks. And he argues that you don't need authority. Basically, for leadership, it's not a role, or it's not an authority. It's a choice that you make. And I cannot tell it better than him. I invite you to basically watch those videos. And for testing, I invite, so what my philosophy is, I invite you to follow or listen to Alan Page. So if you are familiar who that is, good. If not, then this is also the offer which I suggest that you can take a look at. Okay?
Can you please repeat one more time the name of the last guy?
Alan Page. Thank you. Right. So why QA? So why I think the leadership is actually most important or relevant for the QA? There are two reasons. One is general picture. So what are we talking about? How we try to release software these days. So we try to release it frequently. So which is then it's usually a problem for testing, or testing becomes a bottleneck. And usually people like to do this like agility. Almost agile is now a bad word in the industry. Agility is still a good word. And usually it's done by the small engineering teams. So there was a talk yesterday about scaling agile. So scaling agile, it's actually like anti-pattern. You need to descale. You try to then release something by this engineering team and release it frequently, at least as much as you can. And as a result of which, what happens usually with the testing organizations, so when I started 15 years ago, we had a separate testing team, and this is how I started. Now more and more we see that development and QA then merge, and less there is this separate big testing department or a testing team. So then testing becomes what people do, and usually you find yourself not in a testing team, you find yourself in the engineering team. And no separate QA, it's pretty much, if you go to the companies where there is a best QA, usually you find there is no separate testing department, or it's kind of minimized for the integration testing on the infrastructure to actually support the teams to deliver. And as a result of which, there is less and less a role which I have also had for years. It's now less and less frequent. Bad news for people like me. Good news for people like you, because it provides you with the opportunity. So I guess any situation is basically a, you can see the situation as a victim or as something which happens and you need to adapt. Or the leadership way of thinking would be to use this as an opportunity. And really I feel that this is actually a good news for the engineers, because it provides you the opportunity, if you don't have a manager, to do what needs to be done or then what should be done. Example from TeamViewer. So we are organized by by product. So we have several teams in Yerevan doing IoT, teams doing TeamViewer pilot. We have enterprise teams. We have then remote management. So per product. And traditionally we did have that separate testing department, but over the last 2 years we basically reorganized it in a way that pretty much the QA then belongs to all the teams. And recently we even changed the reporting lines. So all the QA, for example, used to report to me and to then Lilith here, so our QA manager then in Yerevan. Now instead we have what we call crews or communities of practice. And then for each engineering manager, so then the reporting line is for the engineering teams. And now I'm not even director of QA, I'm director of then development and responsible for one of the products. Augmented reality, which is, by the way, very exciting. But not the topic of our discussion, so if somebody is interested, augmented reality, we'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. One other thing, so what usually people do, it's not a new story, and in many companies that happens. And if it doesn't happen, that might happen with you also after some time, even in big companies. For us, what people usually do, if they end up then, instead of being in QA team in separate teams or separate parts of the organization, in big organizations, you usually organize something like community of practice. And for us, we also call it QA crew. And the difference between crew and COP for us, so community of practice is more about talking than only talking, basically it's sharing the experience. And crew for us, it's also not only talking and doing something, so also some side tasks. And for us, the QA is crew because there are works associated with maintaining some shared pieces. There are work associated with maintaining crowd testing, testing licenses, test devices and infrastructure and stuff like this. So for us, then instead of separate testing team, so all the people who are doing QA, and we have quite some. Actually, some of the people are in this room now. I'm not sure why, because to support me and not to learn something new, because for them it's not a new stuff. So thank you for this, by the way. But all the people are in their engineering teams, and by team we mean engineering team. And as a QA, we have the community. And then we meet regularly today in drinking. So yeah, this as well. Okay. And also, in many ways, right now, if we're talking about management testing, management is actually now less relevant because you don't need to manage then testing as such that much. But leadership and testing is more important because the testing is becoming actually more and more complicated, and it's actually exciting time to be in testing. So I'm happy for all of you. Right. Second thing, so again, I talked about bigger picture, so why I think in QA it's relevant to have the leadership skills, because the organizations change, because you don't have your manager anymore, and basically it's up to you to then how the testing is organized, how you drive things in your team. Happens more and more often. And now about the testing skills. So what makes then QA great? And right now I work as a QA manager. Before I actually, for many years, was working as an engineer. I was an engineer, then senior engineer, then some technical lead. And what worked for me, why I was quite successful, I loved what I did. But also, what skills did I actually have to be successful? So one is integrity. So it's actually even more important for QA than development to have the integrity. You need to care. You need to be trustworthy. You need to not cut corners, right? To be able to do your job right. And in testing, you can kind of not do that, and would not be the right result. Next one, you need to be a good communicator. You need to be empathic. You are talking about with different people. You are talking about with your product owner. You are talking with the development. Sometimes there are stressful situations. You find critical bug last moment. And what do we do? Some stress. So you need to be able to handle this. Again, you can be in the situation as a victim, or you can be proactive. You can be then kind of handling or driving this conversation. You need to be then empathic, so you need to be able to have the conversations. It's a good skill to have. You need to be decisive. Fundamentally, testing is about risks, risk mitigation. So it's your decision then what test, what not to test, what is critical, what is not critical. And also this conversation, you need to make choices, what you do. Also, you are actually in a good position to drive improvements. So this is a big one. This is what actually separates for me the weak QA from strong QA, because usually if something is not right in your process, if something is not done right in your how you do development, QA usually becomes the victim of the situation. So you don't have time for testing, you cannot test, right? Requirements are bad, you don't know how to deal with this. So if your code is bad, if somebody committed something bad and without some tests, then all of a sudden you find a lot of bugs and find bugs in production. So again, my key idea, in this situation, you can have two positions to take. One is you become a victim, and sometimes that happens. So QA then becomes becomes in a miserable spot. But and it is my experience that QA is actually in a good position to then initiate the change for better. So go and talk to the people, okay, we need this and this for testing to be successful, we need tests, we need, I don't know, let's establish some monitoring and see what actually happens with our code, with our production system. And for me, really, the strong QA is actually changing the situation for better. Weak QA then becomes miserable, which is then not a good thing to do. So again, my encouragement for you, so nothing prevents you to actually then go and change things for better. And sometimes you need to ask for support, but it's exactly the position of leadership, the need for leadership. For example, and this is what I expect from people at TeamViewer, again, sometimes it happens, sometimes it does not happen. We have different situations in different teams. But in general, I do not expect the test engineers who are in teams to do all the testing, but I do expect them to then kind of drive the topic, make sure the testing happens, take care, and this is then what the distinction is. And guess what? You will need to, if you want to change something, you will need to do it without authority. And that's exactly the definition of leadership, to be able to influence the situation without actually ability and authority to do so. And usually for many people, it's actually a stopper. They just, okay, I cannot talk to this person, I cannot change something, they don't report to me, they go to the manager. In practice, it's more like a blindfold. So there is nothing which prevents you. Usually people actually do appreciate, your manager will appreciate, your team will appreciate it if you raise it up and try to influence the situation, even though as a QA you don't have formal authority to do so. For example, and this is example to release more frequently. So when I came first day in the office in Germany, and so in Yerevan it was a bit later. So I talked together all the people who are doing testing in TeamViewer, brought them in one room. Okay, let's have a conversation, let's talk. And also, okay, what do you prefer? Do we talk in English or do we talk in German? Okay, lass uns auf Deutsch sprechen. Okay, wow, okay, let's speak German. Well, first meeting in German. We speak in German, okay, what are our problems? Okay, testing is not in good shape, we're releasing with quality problems, we're not releasing frequently, and the scale, all the nice stuff. And I said, okay, let's do how do we want to see the picture? So I want us to have some kind of vision. What do we want to see in 1 year and 2 years? And let's have some goals. And one of the goals is to release more frequently. And this is what we said, okay, it's almost impossible. And I said, okay, let's do it in 1 year. So for us, the testing cycle, the release cycle for TeamViewer traditionally has been once a year. And recently, relatively recently, it has been once every 3-4 months. And I said, okay, let's our next goal will be to release each month. What do we need to do that? And the first reaction was, okay, that's impossible. Second reaction, okay, let's give it a try, do step by step, establish a plan, and go for this. And we did, and we actually have quite dramatic progress. And what is the best about this is driven by QA, by the people themselves, pretty much. So we established plans, start driving them, change the responsibility from QA to the agile teams, did some automated tests, some infrastructure, built environments, and stuff like this. So, yeah. So this is example. And yeah, so things which I mentioned. So I mentioned things like care, I mentioned empathic, I mentioned communication, drives improvements, integrity, and I'm arguing that this is what I suggest you do or what I expect you do. So normally this is what you would expect from team lead or manager or senior manager, right? So my suggestion is, or my thing is, so it's actually great if you do this. If you actually, again, it's not part of your job description usually. It's not what you are kind of expected to do, but it's actually everybody will love it, and good things will come to you if you do this, like promotion, salary, whatever, but more to the point, making a difference. So if you are making here, it's not for everybody, obviously, but my point is, I think all these things are more relevant for the QA than for development, for example. So this has been my experience in the last years. And this is something which I suggest that you think about this and employ this thought. Okay. Okay, this is this. Okay, and yeah, so my point is, so yeah, this is your food for thought for today. So think about this, maybe also like soft skills, leadership skills, something to put on your like learning and development plans. Okay, one topic which I did not cover is, okay, what about managers? So I talk about there is no managers, okay, and I'm the manager, okay? Let's face it. What do I do? What do I do? What should I do? What is the difference? And here over the last years, the reason I'm actually having this conversation with you, I'm very passionate about the like leadership management in the last several years. And I've always done testing, okay? So I tried to combine that, and this is how this conversation came to life. Now, what happens to the manager? So I tried to digest my thoughts to that, and I came to this, okay, one thing to tell, okay, both managers and disclaimer, both managers and leaders are needed, but we need managers more to manage projects, resources, and stuff like this. And for people, it's more we need leaders, not like manage people as resources. But basically, all my thoughts on this are quite aligned and well presented in this book. Who has read this book? It's called Reinventing Organizations. Nobody. Okay, then I will actually spend several minutes trying to explain to you, which is actually a great thing because, again, normally if I'm going to a management conference, okay, some people have read this. It's not a new book. It's relatively I think it's 10 years or something, or 15. But it actually talks about not only organizations, but also how the societies evolved. Let me try to explain you a little bit about this, because I think it's more about, not only about work, but also about how people operate. So it talks about these concepts of how people organize themselves. And there are 5 stages how people then operate. So first one is that of a like wolf pack. So you then have a group of people. This is how people then operated when they were like prehistoric ages. So you had a powerful leader, and he or she then will kind of like be the leader of the group, of the tribe, operate with fear, command and control, and this is how then the group is organized. Now, right now, people who operate under this, it's pretty much the crime, like mafia and stuff like this. So then you have a leader which then projects fear and operates that. So this is how people actually lived for many, many centuries before like a few thousand years ago, right? This was predominant way of how people then organized in groups. But the problem with that is that and it still happens sometimes, but it's not predominant way of how people organize. So the problem with that is then this leader becomes a single point of failure, and the second thing is then it's not scalable. So you cannot organize the big group of people in this way. So the next step, so wolf pack at scale, it's called army. So you can then have a big numbers of people organized in small groups, and in this situation, it's exactly how army is organized. You then have hierarchy. So I will tell you and you follow my command because I am the lieutenant and you are a soldier. And this is how people then organize themselves. And this is then, it's more stable, it works fast, but it's, again, it's not the predominant way of how we're doing business as far as software development is concerned. So software development is then mostly in the next way. It's with the orange thinking. And in orange thinking, it's then, when you have competition, it's when you have this for profit, and this is where it's about your role. So role, responsibilities, goals, objectives, and all these things, then it's the orange organizations. Usually driven by the P&L, by product goals. And this is how we operate. Most of the organizations operate like this right now. Now, but sometimes basically the argue and the step from orange to green is the fact that sometimes the money is not enough. And people sometimes are just disengaged to operate in either army or in the orange organization, for profit organization. So the green organization is the next step. And this is where if you are like following this agile or like a family type of company, this is the step forward. And this is where you are not only, it's this like culture over strategy company. It's when you not only care about money, but why are you doing things to take care of your customer. And this is where, so majority of the companies are still here, but quite some companies move to this front. If you then these agility types of companies, then they operate mostly there. And this next one is called teal. So it's more this holacracy. It's where you don't, the organization actually becomes less relevant. There are companies who actually even right now operate like this. And it's argued that maybe it's the next step of evolution, which we will see soon enough. That we then will, organizations will become actually less relevant. People will do the right thing and will be able to trust to do so. Now, why I did bring up this model? So I think it's actually quite interesting. So the book argues that the interesting fact about this, it's the speed at which it evolves. So many centuries we operated under this model. So we operated last like 2,000-3,000 years maybe here. In the industrial age we have this, and only recently it's accelerating towards the last two. This is one thing. Second, actually it's not like one is better than the other. So for the purpose of the right like goal, so for example in army you still have yellow and that's fine, because this is what they try to do. It suits the goals. But the reason I brought it up is basically also you see how it a little bit evolves from one to another. And my question from the previous slide was, okay, what happens with managers? What about managers? So you notice that evolution of the role and what the manager, he or she does, he is pretty much everything is around this person. And if person and something happens to them, the group can even cease to exist. So here this role is like delegated and like scaled. Here roles responsibilities, it's more that is driven. Here value, and in the last one it's actually, so the role of the leadership, the role of management then gets more and more like decentralized, evaporates. And I just think it's basically what like reality is. And sometimes there is like not much difference between total chaos and self-organizing teams in practice, but this is what I guess happens with organizations. So again, so we are talking about this. I guess is the main still thing, and right now either most organizations are here or here. Another important thing, which I think my observation is, so what happens usually is the inertia in management evolution. So if you talk about this model, so what usually happens is, especially when people try to like become agile, which sometimes if they just do the agile transformation, it's not a good thing, but usually the problem is that people try to do self-organization, people try to do this agile thing, and they face the situation that the upper management is kind of against it, or like the culture problems and all these things. So there are many talks around this in the in different conferences. But if you look at this picture, it's actually clear why this happens. So because, for me, it's also that it's a management evolution, which means that people who are now at power, they were in power, then the situation was different. They operated and became successful because they operated in this yellow model or the orange model. And now if the business needs us to be green, or if the business needs to be, or the team, the people need to be, to have different type of management and leadership, then there is exactly this disconnect between what upper management thinks and how they operate, and then what business needs or what people need. Which is usually why this whole agile doesn't work in our company and stuff like this. So upper management operates on different level of organization conscience. And second thing is education gap, so which happens all the time. So you are, how people usually become managers. You are a great engineer, you then drive things, you show like leadership, and next thing you know, you become a manager. And without any education, without any support, so all of a sudden you were like a great engineer and you became a bad manager. Happens all the time. Unfortunately, so we all had like bad managers in our situation, which is again, I guess my suggestion to you, and if you think that your manager is not the best manager you have a choice. Option number one, to be a victim in this situation, to suffer or like, I don't know, feel miserable, or leadership position, to change the situation for better. So point number one, it's also from Simon Sinek, so you can actually be the leader you wish you have. Usually, actually, your manager will appreciate it. Most times or not. And if the answer is no, then you know what they say. You can change your manager, or you can change your manager, right? And also, what my caveat to that is, I think if you feel that okay, maybe I should change my manager, and if you cannot change your manager, you should definitely change your manager. So that's I mean, life is too short, and you enjoy actually a quite nice competition here in Yerevan. So people fight for talent, which is a great news for you, and also then the challenge for your managers. By the way, we are actively hiring in TeamViewer. And here is our head of QA, so Lilith, please then go to her. And we have a booth here, so go there as well. And today at the last coffee break, so at 5 o'clock, we will have some also like lottery, some free stuff. So yeah, please be there. So yeah, right. You can change your manager like for TeamViewer. Good. Okay, yeah, so example from me. So what I tried to do. So I talked about blah, 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 what I tried to do. So one thing which I did not mention is pretty much the vision thing. And that's exactly what I do. I try to build a vision. Where do we want to see ourselves in 1 year, in 2, 3 years? Depending on the topic, it used to be the QA topic. Now I'm then busy with the augmented reality. And I try to see, okay, what do we want to accomplish? Because it's then what gives inspiration. The next thing what I do is then I try to position things for success. I try to teach. And also position for success is actually quite an interesting concept. I try to ask myself, okay, are we good? Will we be able to actually accomplish this or not? And if the answer is no, this means we need to change something right now, because we are going to not make what we want to make. And second is admin overhead, things like vacations, leads like stuff. By the way, I automated the approval of vacations. So yeah, I don't need to do that anymore, but okay, if you are a manager, you still have some overhead that you need to take care of. Yeah, this is what I do, which brings me to the tips. So what I suggest you do, again, my thinking is that I wanted to maybe stimulate your thinking, give you a couple of things to think about, maybe a couple of offers to follow. And what I would suggest that you take out of this and think about this. So first, number one, so do you have your learning goals? So, and if yes, so assume yes, actually you are in conference right now. So are soft skills part of this? And fundamentally they should be. So we still then operate under the assumption that technical skills are everything, which is not the case. Next thing, by the conference. So you're actually it's quite exciting to see you here. So it's a holiday. So you are actually already like doing this like leadership step. You're doing a step forward on your free day. You're actually here, which is good. Question which I have to you. Who of you here today is to learn something new? Please raise your hand. Okay, not many of you. Okay, then this was not a trick question. Actually, the second question is also not a trick question. Who are you here to actually for the networking to then have to connect to somebody and then to connect to them later on? Good. A little bit. Okay, I'm not sure what the others are here for. Okay, usually when I ask this question, most are here are actually to learn and a little bit to network, and I always tell that, okay, it should be the other way around. So it should be the other way around because we actually like to meet, we like to talk. The thing is, if you are talking about conferences, there are tons of materials available. I'm not sure if this will be also a case for this talk, so I know that we're being recorded. Tons of conferences which they publish. You fundamentally don't need to be here to actually listen to me. You can use YouTube for this, but you are here, then it should be, so people love to then meet, to talk. So by all means, so I'm here for the rest of the day. If you have any questions, so I'm here actually to share my experience. So I'm here for you, fundamentally, but it's up to you, again, also leadership thing, to use this opportunity or not. So normally people don't use the opportunity. Yeah, so and there are meetups, there are actually online conferences, which then cost nothing. So by all means do so. But my recommendation in conferences, just talk to people, build connections. Also, there are these like famous people who they'll do the keynotes, and usually then they seem like, okay, these are the stars, which is not the case. Basically, you can actually talk to them. Many of them are happy to share their experience. They're approachable. You can even say some of them have like remote mentorship program, and some of them do it for free. by all means do so. It's again, opportunity. So leadership is also about opportunities. Next one, usually take one more step than necessary. So again, you did this already today, so you didn't have to, but you still did. So what works also for me is to have a minimal goal and to have a stretch goal. Let me give you an example. When I started to learn German, I knew for the fact that I'm not good at this. Still, I set my goal that I want to have B1 in 1 year and C1 in 2 years, which means that in 2 years to become actually fluent in German. And I knew it's actually a stretch goal. For me, I did accomplish that, which I'm happy about. But I would be okay to accomplish less. And this is also one of the techniques to then be successful. You can shoot for a little bit more and still be very happy when you reach 70-80% of that. Also, ISTQB certificate. I noticed that it's actually quite heavy, this ISTQB thing in this conference. So who of you have the ISTQB Foundation certificate? Cool, quite some. Who of you have the advanced certificate? Okay, not all of you. Then you see my point. So also, when think about it, you can think about doing this step. I did it myself some time ago. So I just did it and the next step. So, and another thing also, which then is a quite interesting one. So if you want to do a public speaking, so it's quite interesting. The reason I'm here, and it's actually great that I have many people from TeamViewer here. The reason I'm here is really to tell you that it's not a rocket science. Everybody has a story, and especially now we in Yerevan, in TeamViewer, we are doing IoT. It's a great topic. You will be then, any of you can do a talk if you wanted to. And I would be happy to support. And for all of you, each of you have a story. So I'm a big believer in stories, and each of us has a story. And there is no rocket science in any of the conferences. You can share your story with people. And if you think about it hard, there are things to learn from each of you, even if you are not long in the industry. Okay, next thing, actually it's not what I suggest you do, but it worked for me. So each year I do a big learning goal. So I try to set something myself, and I try to spend a little bit of time each week to learn. So the power of that is pretty much accumulative. So time accumulates. We usually underestimate how much we can accomplish short term. We overestimate what we can accomplish short term. We underestimate how we accomplish longer term if we accumulate. If you do something each week for 1 or 2 hours, then you accomplish 100 hours over the last 1 year. In 100 hours, you can actually learn something. This is also how I learned language. I spent a little bit each day. So each and every day for the last actually 4 years, I learned a little bit. Very little bit, but each day. And this is how it accumulated. Again, not suggesting, but it worked for me. And this is what I try to instill on people who then report to me, or for good or for bad, for whom I am the manager. I try to them to formulate the learning and development goals for the year, and try to ping them then each quarter. So I'm not a big fan of the performance goals. I think those would be for the teams, for the departments, and it should be their roadmap is the performance goals. But learning and development could be more the individual thing, and this is what I then try to encourage or even impose a little bit. Yeah, which again brings me to reiterate. I will finish with exactly what I've started. Again, I tried to maybe rationalize or convince you that the leadership as a topic is pretty much very relevant. It's used to be also historically as well as traditionally something which we have for the managers. By the way, in German there is also a special word for this. Auf Deutsch sagt man dann Führungskraft. So then Führungskraft, it's a person who is doing the Führung, which is interesting word. And now it's pretty much okay, Führer is not has some connotation to this. Still, the Führungskraft is exactly how my position is called in German. Abteilungsleiter, also Leiter. Some not good memories on this, but it's pretty much then there is not a good distinction historically between leadership and management, which I think is relevant more and more now. And again, the topic of leadership and management is being now decentralized, and it then up for grabs for all of you. And really, I suggest that you go for this. And yeah, if all the things I tell you are obvious, which is good, so it's more like a disclaimer, so which is good. If I stimulated some thinking, then I'm happy because then I was like more successful. And again, be the leader you wish you had, so everything is in your hands. So if you do so, good things will come to you. And that's all for today. Thank you. Right. Yeah, I'm not sure it makes sense to do the Q&A. I'm here the whole day, so I'm actually more for the person-in-person connection. Please visit our booth. Please talk to me for the rest of the day. My time is actually here for you. I'm here not to learn. I'm here to share my experience. Okay? Okay. Thanks.